If you are watching this video on how Professor PJ handles group grades for group projects, you're likely in one of my classes that actually has a group project. I know how hard it is to work in groups when not everyone performs to your expectations. While sometimes an underperforming member can be removed from a group, other times the group does not have that power. It's frustrating to know that someone who doesn't show up to group meetings, doesn't get work done on time, or submits substandard work gets assigned the same grade as those who work hard and help the group get the best grade it can. To address this situation, I am using a version of the individual accountability model proposed by Professor J. Daniel Rothwell at Cabrillo College. This video should clear up any mysteries as to how this process works. The underlying assumption is that if all group members perform to the minimum group expectations, they should all share equally in the group rewards. The rewards should be equally distributed amongst all the group members. In this case, it's appropriate that everyone in the group earn the same grade. If, however, one or more members do not meet the group's expectations, it's not fair that they get the group grade, but it's also not fair to over-penalize them. The assumption is that they contributed, at least a little, to the group project. So this approach has three main goals. The first is to establish clear expectation of what the group classifies as necessary to share equally in the group grade. Second, to provide an incentive for members to meet or exceed those expectations. And finally, to give the group some power over underperforming group members. Let's use the 1970s cult classic Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Machine group as our example. It seems rather appropriate as I try to clear up the mystery surrounding this process. As some of you may recall, the Mystery Machine has 5 members: Velma, Shaggy, Scooby, Fred, and Daphne. Using this process, early in the Mystery Machine's group formation, everyone discusses the minimum expectations to share equally in the group rewards. These expectations are specific, addressing group meeting attendance, work quality, deadline requirements, etc. All group members agree upon what those expectations are, knowing that if they don't meet them, it will affect their individual grade. Now let's look at 2 scenarios. In the first, everyone did what the group asked them to do. But Velma, being Velma, did much more than the group specified. In this case, as all did what was expected, all should share equally in the group rewards, meaning that all would get the same grade for the group project. In the second scenario, however, Daphne did just what was expected of her. Fred and Velma went over and above the expectations, but Shaggy and Scooby both slacked off. They did not meet the group's minimum stated expectations. In this case, Shaggy and Scooby have not earned the right to share equally in the group grade. They should be allocated a smaller share, with the remaining share allocated to Fred, Velma, and Daphne. Pay attention to the wording. The key terms are minimum stated. The group identifies what is expected as a minimum to share equally in the group grade. For everyone to meet those expectations, they must be stated explicitly. You can't assume that everyone holds the same expectations that you do unless you discuss them. All group members should agree to the minimum standards early in the group process. And as our memories get a little fuzzy over time, those expectations should be put in writing. You can refer back to them if needed. If as time goes on, the group feels that the expectations need to be adjusted, you can do so with the agreement of the group. It's just not fair to penalize Scooby if Scooby has no idea that he's not living up to the group's expectations. And how would Scooby know if those expectations were never verbalized? Once these expectations have been met and agreed to, if Scooby violates that expectation, the group should discuss it with him and remind Scooby of the consequences if he continues to underperform. Now turning to Velma. Because of her personality, Velma is likely to do way more than what is necessary for the group, whether or not she is compensated for it. But just because she chose to do the lion's share of the work does not mean that she should automatically earn a higher score. So how does this work exactly? Well, let's assume that the Mystery Machines project earns a score of 88%. That would be the group grade. A percentage of that group grade, let's say 75%, is allocated as the base grade. In this example, 75% of 88 points is 66 points. No one in the group will earn less than this 66 points. The remaining points are available to be distributed to the group members. In this case, 88 minus 66 equals 22 distribution points. These points are allocated to each person based upon the individual accountability measure as follows. Each group member divides up 100% amongst all the rest of the members in the group, excluding him or herself. So Fred divides up 100% amongst Velma, Daphne, Scooby, and Shaggy. Velma does the same, leaving herself out of the calculations, and so on. These are summed across to determine each group member's accountability percentages, which is then multiplied by the distribution points, remember those 22 points, to figure out how many points will be added back into each group member's base grade to yield their individual grade. If everyone did their fair share, then all will end up getting 100% of the 22 distribution points added to the base of 66 points, meaning that all would earn the original group grade of 88 points. However, if Scooby and Shaggy underperformed, their accountability percentages would be less than 100%, meaning Velma, Fred, and Daphne would have accountability percentages in excess of 100%. No matter what, no one would earn less than the base grade of 66 points, which again is 75% of the group grade. Sound confusing? Well, let's look at two scenarios. First is the scenario where everyone meets the minimum expectations. 75% of the group grade of 88 means 66 points for the base grade, leaving 22 points available for distribution. Fred breaks 100% out equally at 25% for each of his group mates. Velma does the same, as does everyone else in the group. Adding down, each person's individual accountability percentages are 100%. Multiply that by the individual accountability points means that everyone gets the 22 points back, meaning everyone ends up with the original group grade of 88 points. For the second scenario, assume that Scooby-Doo flaked out completely. In this case, Fred allocates 0% to Scooby and then distributes the remaining 100% fairly equally amongst his fellow group mates, Velma, Daphne, and Shaggy. Velma, Daphne, and Shaggy do the same. Scooby distributes his 100% equally amongst Fred, Velma, Daphne, and Shaggy. We sum down to get the individual accountability percentages. In this case, Scooby's 0% translates into 0 individual accountability points, meaning that he ends up with 66 points for the group project. The others, then, earn more than the original group grade. Think about these keys to success. Be clear about the expectations, being specific and writing them down. Everyone should agree to the minimum expectations early in the group's formation. Check in with your group frequently to ensure you, as well as others, are meeting those expectations. And document behaviors that are below those minimum expectations. If you need to address an issue, talk to the people first. They may not be aware that they're skating on thin ice. Perhaps the expectation needs to be clarified. If that doesn't help, your second step is to put it in writing. In any case, point to the stated expectations and remind the person of the consequences of not meeting the group's minimum stated expectations. Processing time. How does this individual accountability assessment process grant a group power over its members? What is the importance of identifying minimum group expectations for a contributing group member? And what procedure would the group use to communicate that a group member was not meeting those stated minimum expectations? I hope this explanation helps everyone in your group contribute to and enjoy your group experience, and that this process is much less of a mystery.